Welcome, everyone. So nice to see everyone again. I was really looking forward to seeing you, and particularly going to welcome your questions today, or your offering something of yourself, something of your life, whether it be a question or an insight or some pondering that you have, and how we can bring these together to make this, as I described it last time, this model, this kind of formula, how to make it relevant. So before we meditate, I want to just review what we talked last week. The main word that I want to again bring to our attention is this word Avidya. When we first met, we spoke, what is knowledge? What is knowledge? When one comes to the end of all that knowledge which is of things, then what is there left to know? Good morning. So the sense of knowing, what do we know? It led the attention to realize, how much do we know ourself? And this word self is what is the very core of our investigation, our inquiry. That we can know many things, but who is knowing? One can spend a whole lifetime ignoring that. So all of us, whether we are conscious of it or not, have been led to want to know more than the knowledge of things. So when we say the word self, one will sometimes relate to that word self as my personality self. So very simply, how you can distinguish what self has the depth, carries the light, that which is unchanging. The self that is of change, which is the self of your preferences, what you like, what you don't like, what you have, what you don't have, what titles you've gained, what certificates you've gained. All that which has been gained is in the field of change, obviously, because it's something you acquired. So anything around this notion of yourself that is to do with change is of our personal self. So the self that we are inquiring now, what is that self that has remained throughout? A human being, we don't know how this worked out, how this came about, but there is a deep knowing in every human being, or at least if they don't know that they know it, there is a great desire for permanence. And we actually have a sense of a permanent self. Because when we sleep and again wake up, we never say, I woke up as someone else. When we describe ourselves in our teenage years, even though we had completely different preferences at that time, I don't describe myself as someone different now in my more matured years because I have different preferences. I even looked different in my teenage years than I do now, but I say there I am still the same self. So very simply, self is described as that continuum that has remained throughout the changes. This is the exploration in knowledge, what we know. We know a lot about our changing self. We have a whole history of our changing self, of our personality self. But what do we know of that which is permanently myself? No problem. Come in, grab a chair. Hi. I never mind people coming and going. Doesn't matter at all. Just like in your meditation, you're not disturbed by the comings and goings of your thoughts. These are just two thoughts that came in the room.
Wonderful thoughts.
Thought one and thing one and thing two. Oh, really? Cute. There we go. That's so sweet. So in Sanskrit, when the syllable a in this instance, comes in front of the word vidya or ved, which means knowledge. It means the opposite. Avidya, forgetfulness of our true self. And according to Advaita Vedanta, this is the root cause of all unease and dissatisfaction and conflict in one's life. Now, there's nothing more really to know or that I can share other than to bring this to light. But I would not expect you to just accept that. Although I have now an unshakable conviction in this to be true, I would not expect you just to adopt this as a belief. My participation here is to facilitate the exploration of this truth that suffering, unease, conflict, worry, fear, all comes from the forgetfulness of your true self, which is also, you could say, the identification I am of your changing self. But it's not enough to just accept it as a theory. It needs to be explored. It needs to become your own revelation. It needs to become your own conviction. And that takes some exploration and also some meditation. So satsang and meditation are the exploration, what is my true self? And meditation is to take that as our direct realization, not just as a theory. But we play with these concepts initially in order to prepare the soil for the meditation. Avidya, lack of knowledge, absence of knowledge of your true self. You can never not be your true self, but do you know your true self? But as we talked at length in our first meeting, this is not the knowing that is of our school knowing, which is through logic, through memorizing often, through a process that has a beginning and a process leading to some end. This kind of knowing is more meditative. It is a returning to what you already know to make it conscious. So I like this description from my friend. I gave you these handouts, reading his book recently. The basic erroneous knowledge or mechanism of consciousness that divides the unchanging self and identifies with all that is changing. The basic erroneous knowledge, I like this word erroneous, meaning it is made up. And your father last time, John, asked about the ego. And I'd like to explore that, even though he's not here, but you can discuss it with him. It's a very, very often thought of concept that our ego is a problem, that it gets in the way of our happiness, our freedom. And that then you have to now remove the ego in order to reach happiness. And this, you will end up a lifetime of frustration with this kind of idea. Erroneous means it is imaginary. It is an imagination that you are divided from yourself. It's not a reality. It's not true. But just as in a mirage in the desert, something can appear to be real, but it's not true. It's not true that there's water in that mirage. It appears there's water in the mirage. So similarly, it appears that I am divided from my ever-present, ever-free self, but it is not true. Therefore, the ego is an erroneous knowledge. So how do we now deal with an erroneous knowledge, a fantasy, an imagination? Well, it's much easier than dealing with a thing. If your car breaks down and you have to take it to the mechanic, you're dealing with a thing. You need someone else to fix it. The beauty of knowing that the ego is erroneous, you need no one to fix you. you don't actually even need fixing. You need to only awake to the false nature of your ego self. Meaning, another way, instead of false, if that feels a bit harsh to call you false, the changing nature, the temporary nature of your personality self. And we know all the ways that we prop up our personality. We're all enough personality aware to know all the strange mechanisms that come into place in trying to support our personality ego, wanting it to always shine and be seen as great or be loved in that way, be appreciated, be secure. So our reputations and our ideas about ourselves are very much invested in it being shone in a nice light, in a good light, or at least, if you're talking about security, on something solid. But what is our experience is that that which is of the personality is of change, therefore it has an inherent insecurity that one day you can be made great. Even feeling great, you can entertain the doubt. Is that really true? And the person who made you great, or the accolade that you got that made you great, or the thing that you have that made you great, that could be taken away. So have we invested our sense of self in a changing self? That is just an erroneous knowledge. I also liked it being described as a mechanism of consciousness. It is the same consciousness, and how that consciousness works when it is in relation to things, when it is needing to function in relation to things, then it is the same consciousness who speaks, using words, using language, engaging my brain to use language and to find the right words. And all the beautiful complexity of being human, which is the mechanics of consciousness. Same consciousness. Same consciousness that when the waking state dissolves into deep sleep, consciousness remains the same. And out of that same consciousness is produced a dream, is produced a thought, a feeling, a hand, a heart, a curtain, a tree, and all that which is in manifestation arises, a sprout to come up, a thought to appear, a feeling to emerge. From what has this emergence come? Something cannot come out of nothing. So consciousness is the source of all that we see, including ourselves. That consciousness is not something separate from you. And this is the main key point. Consciousness is not something you as a person are going to reach or attain or acquire or realize or have the knowledge of. You are that consciousness. How we can bring this into our direct knowing is the purpose of satsang and meditation. Because the erroneous knowledge, when we do not realize that it is false, then comes the deception that I am divided from myself. Being divided from yourself, you're in a situation of need. Divided from your sense of self, you will be searching for security, searching for love, searching for contentment, ease, peace, because you are incomplete as a divided self. So this is a revisitation, and we'll go over and over this. I think it's emerged as the key point of this satsang series because avidya is one of the main key cornerstones of Advaita Vedanta. What does it mean that I have forgotten myself? What is that by which, in the erroneous idea that I'm divided from myself and thereby in need of fulfilling myself externally, how does this now create all kinds of struggle and difficulty in our life? So I said, today we are going to make this knowledge relevant to our lives, because meditation addresses the human predicament that we know somewhere deep inside, but we cannot quite live it, and that is that our true nature is peace, freedom, and love. In other words, it is to be liberated from fear, confusion, desire, and worry, and agitation, and all that which we spend a lifetime trying to remove. So let's take a moment now in meditation. Close your eyes, because the waking state mind can receive this information, but it needs some meditation to sit with it and view not with the divided intellect, but view from the observer. Just observe this that you have absorbed, any part of it, or in any way that it resonates with you. And just sit with it. Let it resonate as an observation, not as a grasping with the divided intellect. The intellect of logic, doubt, skepticism. Who are you? And how, in knowing yourself truly, not falsely, erroneously, how this can unfold. Such a light from within that liberates you from all kinds of suffering, all kinds of struggle, confusion, and fear.